I was collecting them like Pokemon. Certifications, that is. I would think, I'll be ready when I get this next certification, or my portfolio looks pristine, or when I finally feel confident enough. But the finish line kept moving. I'd get the certification and be happy for a while, but then I'd realize that there was yet another thing that I wasn't knowledgeable in, and the whole process would just repeat itself again. I'd spend hours watching videos on how to come up with content ideas, how to edit videos, and how to write captions. In the state of being ready, at least the way I defined it, kept stalling. The problem was I was comparing myself to people years ahead of me, people who had been in the game much longer, and that's not a fair standard. Comparing your beginning to someone else's middle almost always leads to imposter syndrome, perfectionism, and paralysis. And at that rate, you'll never feel ready. A person who thinks all the time has nothing to think about except thoughts. If you're on social media, then you probably thought this was just a trending audio. I did, but it turns out it's an actual quote by British writer and speaker Alan Watts, and it's one that called me out. The rest of the quote says, "So he loses touch with reality and lives in a world of illusion." I would say I'm a thinker and a planner. I like to think 10 steps ahead, which can be helpful at times, but I found that as a result, I'd get paralyzed trying to think through each and every step. I'd stress over not knowing what I don't know, and I'd wind up in the same exact place. I had nothing to think about except thoughts, because I never turned those thoughts into action, tangible results. Whoa, I went full philosopher there for a second. But that's when I realized something. Sometimes we use planning as procrastination. We overthink instead of executing, and then call ourselves perfectionists to dress up our fear in a prettier outfit. If you feel called out, don't worry, you're not alone. Hey there, I'm Kayla, a content strategist, writer, and multi-passionate creative marketer who knows what it's like to use planning as procrastination when it comes to making content. But I also know what it's like to overcome that. So if you've been planning your content, thinking about posting, researching, but still not actually doing it, this video is for you. Because today I want to help you figure out whether you're actually planning or just procrastinating in disguise and what to do about it. How to tell if you're planning or procrastinating. Number 1. Planning leads to action. Procrastination delays it. The whole point of planning is that when you take action, things will be much more seamless. For someone looking to start making content, this may look like getting clear on who you want to make videos for, what topics you want to talk about, or what equipment you might need. Getting fairly clear on these things reduces friction when you actually start. Now I say fairly clear because diving in helps you clarify even more. Procrastination, that is disguised as planning, pushes back action. It's always looking for one more thing that needs to be done before you start. So if your planning ends with you taking a step, it's useful. But if it keeps pushing the start date further away, it's avoidance. Number 2. Planning simplifies. Procrastination complicates. I always say that strategy has more to do with clarity than complexity. As humans, we often look for the hardest way to do something. We assume certain things need to be difficult when in reality, it's our own overthinking that complicates the process. Real planning makes things clearer. Procrastination adds more steps, more conditions, more what ifs, and before you know it, months have passed and you're still in the same place. Number 3, planning has a stopping point. I'm all for planning. Like I said before, I'm a thinker. Maybe you are too. And sometimes an overthinker if we're being honest. But there comes a time when the thinker must become a doer. If you don't know when you'll start, you're probably not planning. You're stalling. So ask yourself, what am I actually avoiding right now? Now, if the reason you haven't started making content is because you feel like you don't know enough about anything, I'm here to tell you that that is a lie. Yep, you're being a silly Billy. But unfortunately, this is something a lot of people think. Here's what I wish I understood earlier. You don't need to be an expert to start. You just need to be a little bit ahead of someone else. In the book 2 Weeks Notice by Amy Porterfield, there's something called the 10% edge, which is the idea that you only need to be 10% more experienced than the person you're helping. 10% more experience, 10% more clarity, 10% more perspective, and that's enough to make a difference. So if you're waiting to feel ready, you may already be ready for someone. And sometimes the best way to close the gap between thinking and doing is to start helping anyway. Now, as a disclaimer, if the topic is something serious like medical advice or financial advice, things that can get people in trouble if they listen to someone that doesn't know what they're talking about, then you would most likely need more certification and clarify in your content that this is not financial advice, or say I am not a nutritionist, I am not a doctor, So please confirm with your financial advisor or your medical provider. But yes, there are certain topics that do need more certifications, more qualifications to talk about. But if it's something, I don't know, like something you've experienced, right? If you know how to build muscle in the gym, you've done it for yourself, you've helped out a few friends, that's something that you're qualified to talk about because you actually have personal experience with it. Make sense? So if you've been stuck in planning mode, here's what I want you to do. Take one idea that you've been sitting on, and turn it into a post today. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. A quote that I really like is, just make it exist first. You can make it good later. Like I said earlier, the thinker must become a doer. And doing doesn't require 100% certainty. In fact, I've learned the most when I only felt 95% ready, even less. So instead of waiting to feel ready, you might just need to start. And if turning your ideas into content is something that you've been struggling with, that's exactly what I help people do. Taking what's already in your head and turning it into something real. So if that's something you're interested in, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe so we don't lose each other. Now go make that first piece of content. I mean it. I'll see you soon.